Welcome to the Ascend Growth AI podcast, where we mix smart growth moves with a little AI magic. I'm Theresa. Let's dive in. For today's guests, we have David Quintilio, who is the founder and president of Leverage Supply Chain Group. He has an impressive 3 decades of supply chain experience, and I'm so excited to talk to him today. So, David, welcome.
Thank
Can
you.
you talk about your role in Leverage Supply Chain Group, the company, and anything that you'd like to share?
Absolutely, and appreciate you having me, Teresa. Yeah, the background piece, it starts way back in college with when I started with UPS, and that's what gets you to the 3 decades. So don't do too much math on that, but yes, it's been a long run in the supply chain industry, and that kind of culminated in 2020. January, when I became SVP of UPS Healthcare as my final gig with UPS. And we all know what happened in January of 2020. COVID era began and UPS Healthcare was formed then. So obviously ran hard for 2 years, the final 2 years there. And then when I left UPS, I still wanted to help our customers and be in the supply chain industry. So that's when I started Leverage Supply Chain Group along with participating in a few different boards on some channel partners that we have, as well as advisory work with both private equity and manufacturers. And that was the genesis of Leverage Supply Chain Group.
Perfect. And can you talk about a little bit what Leverage Supply Chain Group does?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a group of folks that, have been pulled together as previous supply chain practitioners, people that I worked with in the past, some of the partners here have worked with in the past, either as customers or on the same teams. A lot of supply chain representation here from both the manufacturing side and 3PL or third-party logistics practitioners. And practitioners is the key because that's really what we are. We're not consultants. So all of these folks have a lot of experience in the industry, and so this real world experience comes down to what we focus on, which is helping our customers, whether it is private equity, 3PLs, manufacturers, but the companies optimize their supply chain. So whether that's cost cutting or identifying cost overrun areas, whether it's enhancing revenue growth, identifying revenue leakage areas, building resilient carrier strategies, running RFP processes for them, evaluating acquisitions, or even just driving customer experience initiatives. It's these practitioners that have been there and done that.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's leverage, and I know you asked me about the triangle in the back behind us, and that
Mhm.
represents our tagline, which is explore, connect, and solve. So 3 sides of a triangle, which is also in our logo for leverage. But the explore, connect, solve tagline really compartmentalizes what we do. So the explore aspect is just working with our customers to identify those areas that I talked about before. Again, whether it's a manufacturer, 3PL, private equity, we identify the gaps in their supply chains. And then we connect either internal folks here at Leverage or our external channel partners to come up with a plan to address those gaps. And then finally, the solve component is where we differentiate ourselves, because a lot of folks can identify, and there's an old commercial that said, if you guys remember back in the day, this commercial that said, "Oh, here's what you need to do, so and so," and they say, "Okay, go do it," and then they say, "We don't do that. We actually do that." Right? So we've got the people that have done that. They have experience executing it successfully. So they take it, from design phase to actual execution and final resolution.
That's fantastic. I mean, I can see a lot of value with that. I mean, consultants just come in, they give you a nice high level strategy, and then they leave and expect the companies to deliver. But it sounds like with your practitioners, you guys add real value right away. And given all the experience, people know what to do. There's no learning curve.
That's exactly right. And that's where most of our business generates from is addressing those gaps of experience and helping with the strategy and then actually executing with the folks that have experience.
That's fantastic. Who is your ideal customer?
Ideal customer is a mid-market customer that is growing, expanding, maybe beyond their capabilities and their means, so that we can help them fill these gaps that they may have, and that they have outgrown maybe their footprint. They have acquired other companies, and so they're trying to figure out how to merge everything together from a supply chain perspective, or whether it's a mid-market PE company looking at a company that they may not understand completely what to look for to determine whether it's a good acquisition acquisition or really how to optimize post acquisition. So those are our ideal customers, is really where we see somebody that wants to grow or is growing, whether it's a 3PL or a manufacturer or private equity that plays in that mid-market space. Once you get kind of too big, we love to help the big companies, but sometimes they get in their own way and it becomes a bit frustrating, which maybe we'll talk about further.
I can definitely relate to that. And what geographic area does your company cover?
Actually, we're global. I spent some time working in my prior life at UPS. Obviously, I spent a lot of time internationally. I had global responsibilities for all the operations. But in the consulting, I spend a lot of time, myself and the team, in Europe and Asia as well. Predominantly North America, but we've certainly been engaged in Europe and in Asia from a supply chain standpoint, especially when you start talking about RFP management, which can be very lucrative for our customers when they really run a thorough global RFP. And so then we spend a lot of time working with the European providers and Asian.
Okay, no, that's great to know. Thank you. So before we dive further into your business, let's talk about the market. How are you doing in today's market? Tariffs, rising costs of inflation, there's so many things. Has it impacted your growth? And what are you guys doing about it?
Yeah, so AI, tariffs, inflation, right? So AI, a lot of noise around there. What does it actually do for you? Well, it depends, but there is a lot of opportunity. And so where we come in and we help is, where does it make sense? So and you can throw in automation and robotics along with AI, because those are all the areas where you really need the business case and the ROI to make sense. There's still a lot of areas where humans make a difference in supply chain. So, certainly repetitive tasks, can be automated, and AI learning can be beneficial. However, you still need that interpretation and an accurate interpretation of what's going on. And then, of course, the relationships in this industry are key anyway. So whether it's internal or whether it's with vendors or providers or customers, the relationships matter. So you can't AI that.
Completely.
Tariffs. Tariffs and geopolitical risks. Well, there's been, in the industry right now, volatility is kind of the new normal. And so the geopolitical events, the weather disruptions, the pandemics, and all the way down to carrier instability, agility has to be there. So these black swan events are becoming more gray swan events, right? Maybe not completely predictable, but what you can predict is something's going to happen, because it is pretty much every year now something's going on. So you just really need to be more agile, and that's a somewhat overused term, but what that means is you've got the capabilities in your supply chain network. You've got a diverse supplier portfolio. You address the geopolitical risk with nearshoring, multimodal options from a carrier network, and diversifying not only suppliers but your supply chain carriers as well. Inflation, I think, was the third one you asked about. That's impacting our customers' business and ours to a degree, in that people are a little hesitant to make investments right now, but still the opportunity to reduce costs or increase revenue is still there. So they're maybe more focused on that and not as much major investment as in certain times. So it creates opportunity in the cost cutting area and maybe less on the investment side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Related to the agility that you mentioned earlier, do you find that a lot of companies are changing their strategy to become more agile, or are they having a hard time figuring it out?
Yeah, I relate it back to, pandemic times, and really look at any black swan events and see what's happened is it's a pendulum, right? People got stuck with being a little too lean during the pandemic. So these lean strategies, while financially, made sense, it creates more of a rigid supply chain in the fact that you can't just push things through, especially in times of the pandemic and carrier availability and so forth. So it kind of swung the other way to keeping more inventories. Well, that's not the right answer, right? You're keeping more inventory at the consumption areas, that costs a lot of money too. So what do you need to do? So you need to look at diversifying your manufacturing, creating more manufacturing points and closer manufacturing points to consumption. So we are seeing clients doing that, and we have been helping them with that. But the first place to address is just looking at your supplier and supply chain networks and saying, are they agile? So people are doing that, but then the next step, and it's not an overnight thing, is to look at your manufacturing and where is it, and in particular when you're growing, consider putting the new capacity in the consumption area.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. So now let's dig into Leverage Supply Chain Group. What is working well for you right now amongst everything that we just talked about, and what are you proud of?
Well, what is working well is kind of what I spoke to earlier, and that's because we're practitioners and have practical execution experience. Clients are hungry for that. So this substantial experience they get without having a substantial price tag to it, whether that's carving out internal resources, which can be multi-millions of dollars to carve out, or having to put on full-time people, which come with many other costs and which are fixed. You create that variable capacity with real people that have substantial experience, but not that substantial price tag as maybe a larger consulting firm would have, or the internal resources. That's working well. The ability for us to attract and retain people at Leverage. So we're 25 strong now. And that's all the people, again, that have been uh, friends of friends, so clients, vendors, customers, coworkers in the past that have joined the team and really like the mission and where we're going to help folks in need in their supply chains, and take on opportunities that really makes the team feel good that we've really made an impact with a customer. And then we have other things here like an intern program where we just bring folks from the local universities to help them understand what supply chain is, what it means, and all the facets of it, and say, is that something you want to do in the future? So we bring a few in every summer, and part of giving back is working with them in that area.
No, that's good. I can tell by when you talk about your team, you're really proud. There's a
Oh
smile
yeah.
that comes out naturally, so that's really nice to see. What has been frustrating with the business in general?
I think it's the wait and see approach we get sometimes, because when you want to feel good about a project and a customer, and you think you've laid it out, and this kind of goes back to some of the big company areas we talked about before. Maybe mid market is the preferred kind of growth area. Is that if something we see and recommend and makes sense and will help gets stuck, that gets very frustrating. So it can be stuck because of people that have old paradigms and don't want to change. It could be corporate governance getting in the way, or the fact that there's lacks clear leadership and direction to make the call in that area. So that's frustrating. Some of the AI and tech can be a bit frustrating because people say, "Oh, just put AI in for me, or just put automation in for me," but it doesn't really replace the operational experience and leadership that you need in what is still a complex relationship driven industry. So you have to have both. You have to leverage the new technologies and blend that in with the real people and the real experience and leadership.
Exactly. Yeah, I like to tell people that, or I've heard this from Deloitte, right? Is AI is not going to replace people, but people with AI is going to replace people without AI. So exactly to your point, it's both. You have to have both.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Although
Yeah.
let's not use the Deloitte word.
I promise I won't say that anymore.
That probably costs more for that than just our complete engagement. So it's okay.
That's true. And then when you said the frustration with the larger companies, with the smaller mid-sized companies, do you find that sit and wait a lot, or do things move faster with them?
No, with them typically, because they are smaller, they typically tend to be on a growth curve. So when they engage us, they're actually going to do something. Versus some of the larger mid market or higher, sometimes any of the Gilberts or any of the corporate where they're made fun of can come into play, right? And it's, oh, they just want somebody to validate what they think is right. And it's more of a true, consulting engagement in the respect of getting justified for things, which we really want to see results and help companies grow. So, and it's not all big companies. Hey, I worked at a big company most of my career and successful both the company and myself. So, but that also helped me identify and understand where there's gaps and where we can come in and fill the gaps for even the large companies, because there's not somebody that's nimble and agile that can get in there quickly and make it happen. So we work with a lot of large companies in that respect of they know where they have some deficiencies and where we can supplement that, whether it's some of the larger 3PLs or larger manufacturers.
No, that makes sense. How do you find your customers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't really answer that because they kind of find us, which is good. A lot of them are past relationships because over the years I've been part of running supply chains for hundreds and hundreds of large companies, both in the healthcare sector where I finished, but also in retail, high tech, e-commerce, where I had strategy, marketing, sales, operations. So in different capacities, I ran into a lot of people there. And so have the two managing partners that are here, Mike Borgerson and Bobby Clements. Also have a vast Rolodex for all those old people like me that know what that term means. But we've converted it all to digital, trust me.
No Rolodex anymore.
Yeah.
A digital Rolodex.
Yeah. So there's lots of contacts in prior lives that they know they can trust us because that's what our names mean, and that's what the leverage brand means. Is you walk around with a couple things, and one of those things is your brand and your integrity. And so if you've got that, it's a small world out there in the supply chain industry, especially in certain sectors. So people know results and companies that are helping. And so most of ours are from referrals or people we've worked with in the past. We don't advertise. We don't have SEO or other than social media, where we just talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so that's where most of our business comes from.
That makes sense. I mean, just hearing about your team and how much experience they have, I mean, I can see where a lot of companies would drive a lot of value with working with you guys. Is going beyond word of mouth something that you guys are planning on doing, or?
Yeah, when I look out 6 to 12 months, I think the mid-market companies, PLs, private equity, you name it, we want that to expand significantly. Like I said, we've been fortunate to have both resources and customers come via word of mouth and referral. But to really expand in the areas we want to expand, it will take a targeted approach. So we have sales and marketing folks. We spend a lot of time on strategy and where we want to focus specifically in the areas I mentioned prior, or where we're focusing. But another big area is productizing our services. So what that'll allow us to do is to scale more rapidly without a lot of time to action,
Mhm.
or in time to results for our customers. So by productizing what we do, whether it's RFP management, whether it's pre-diligence for an acquisition, whether it's knowledge on demand, where, hey, I want to talk to somebody for, a few hours, or I want them to come here and look at our operation for a day or a week. You're really creating a product for that. So there's not this whole consulting engagement process that needs to go through in the beginning. Here it is. Here's the price. Here's what you get. So it's really just paying for the resources to take a look, and then we'll let you know what we think and what opportunities exist, or help you understand better whatever topic you're looking for.
And so it's kind of like a menu of options that people can choose from based on their need and their budget. Does that?
Exactly. So you pick it, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. Here's what that looks like. Here's the resources you get for, an RP engagement. Here's the time frame, the resources. Here's what the results will be, and here's what the efforts will be. So it's really creating that as opposed to something that's not as tangible for people to get their arms around.
Right. That makes sense. Are there metrics that you measure around that?
Yeah. So the typical metrics are obviously what's important to our customers: cost to serve, big one. And we identify areas for improvement there to improve the cost to serve, whether that's total supply chain costs or customer specific costs, product cost, lane cost, carrier cost, trans, warehousing. We break it down into those areas. It's amazing how many people know the total cost, but they can't break it down or don't have it at customer profitability, lane profitability, center profitability, even 3PLs can't identify it to that level to know where to focus their efforts. So we help in that area. Revenue growth, our customers all want and need it faster and need more of it, right? Everybody wants more of it. So we help with go-to-market strategies there. I mentioned the acquisition diligence and the revenue leakage. So that's a big metric is where do we want to go from revenue growth? Where do we want to go from a cost to serve? And both of these obviously impact profitability, right? More revenue, less cost. So you track these two, you'll get the profitability. But the time to get there is also a big metric. So time to savings. So we want clients to see the ROI faster and recognize it faster. So we're tightening the scopes on that. That's another output of the productization that we mentioned is going to be tightening that. And then your normal kind of customer satisfaction metrics, on time in full, voice of customer insights. We help quantify that for our folks.
That's perfect. How about what you guys measure internally within Leverage Supply Chain Group? What are, as the president, what are the metrics that you are most tracking, I guess, for your own team?
Yeah, from a metrics standpoint, it really does come down to those individual engagements and are we hitting the metrics that I walked through for those customers, which ultimately leads to customer satisfaction. Obviously we get project profitability, but how well did we execute to the timeline we represented, to the cost we represented? Those areas are critical for, again, our brand integrity out there for people to say, yeah, they executed to what they said and on time. Those are the key ones.
Okay. So it sounds like it's number of engagements and then the quality of the engagements. And how much is it delivering to the customer or the key ones?
Yeah. Are we hitting, and to quantify it, it's, the timeline was 12 weeks and we hit 13 weeks. So, why, and is it something we can do better in the future? Or the projected cost of the engagement was 100 grand and it was 75 grand. Great. How did we do that? Those types of metrics and analysis.
And earlier you mentioned, getting to a certain place in 6 to 12 months. How do those metrics change for you? Is it more number of customers? Is it lower cost per project? Like, how can you talk about how that would change if you get to your goal in 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so the 6 to 12 months, I mentioned expanding, in particular the mid-market, but so it would be number of customers in 6 to 12 months, number of engagements, but also I mentioned the productization, right? And success for us over the next 6 to 12 months is how well we have these products established and the uptake of these programs and products with our client base. So those are the true measures of a success for us over the next 6 to 12 months.
That makes sense. Well, what's stopping you from getting there faster than 6 to 12 months?
I think it's awareness. You asked me prior about customers and how we get customers and what we're doing. I mentioned we're not doing anything from a true kind of customer acquisition, sales, marketing to grow the business. Obviously, the social media helps to get the word out, but there's still a lack of awareness of who we are and what we do other than word of mouth, and client referrals. So we've talked about doing some SEO and other marketing initiatives. So I know we will do some of that as part of the strategy to grow over the next 6 to 12 months. But once we have a client, the clients know the difference the moment we engage. So that tell a friend, and hopefully the triangle will obviously lead to more engagements and more happy customers.
That makes sense. I mean, the good thing is you guys have a strong reputation, right? I mean, probably a lot of testimonials, a lot of case studies, right? So once they do hear about you, it's an easy sell, I would think. So
certainly makes it much easier when you've got the satisfied clients that you can refer to.
Exactly. If you were to give your younger self some advice right? And knowing what you know now about leverage supply chain group, what would you do differently? What would you say to yourself on what to do differently?
Well, I probably would have started this sooner. Um, would be my advice. But the other piece of advice I would add is people get caught up in processes and governance and think they're adding a lot of value when they're really not. I can think of things that I did in prior lives that really didn't add a ton of value, but you think so at the time. So you always need to question, why am I doing this? And what's the benefit and what's the result? And reevaluate it. And is there a way to do it better?
Mhm.
And the other thing is the value of a relationship. I think when you're younger, you don't realize what true leadership is and how those relationship skills really drive the success or failure with poor leadership skills of a business. So how you interact with people internally may have been a bit too aggressive in prior lives, and I would say be more careful or be more thoughtful of what you're saying and who you're saying it to and what you mean, but the tone of how you say it for internal purposes, especially. And then, of course, building relationships with the customers and suppliers is key, especially when there's a crisis situation going on and you need their help. Obviously, the great relationship will go a long way.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. Let's see. And I guess like any advice, right, that you'd want to give to others who are experiencing, some of the same challenges as you, or maybe some of the same challenges as what your customers are seeing.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice for our customers has been stop thinking you must fix it internally with internal resources. Again, the multi-millions of dollars that's spent internally on projects that are, and tend to be sometimes the people that are causing the problems, you're trying to employ them to fix them. Well, they don't really know how to fix them because they're causing them. So it's look for an outside perspective, and sometimes a 90-day engagement by an expert with the right experience can offset millions of internal costs that you'd spend, or a large engagement. If you have somebody just come take a peek, that's done it before, because you can't scale chaos. So you have to fix the foundation so you're not trying to rebuild it during a crisis later on. So we always take a look at the foundation and know where to fill the gaps and cracks and create that strong foundation and build out and grow from there.
Yep, that makes sense. Well, and why do you think people look internally? Is it fear? Is it not trust? Or like what do you think the reason is?
Well, a lot of times is people think, hey, we've got resources here that should be able to do this. Well, they're also doing it day to day, so they don't have time maybe, or they have certain paradigms that they're not thinking through to take a step back and assess where it's at. But at the same time, people say, well, we've got the resources to do it. They know what they're doing. They should be able to fix it on this project. So it's really that paradigm or mindset that maybe somebody should come take a look.
Mm-hmm.
I know what a roof is. I know how to put shingles on a roof, but I can't tell you why it's always leaking. So I might need somebody to come take a look.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's probably why the people who know you, right, are willing to take a look because of that trust and they know that experience. They're willing to step outside. For the customers who don't know you, do you think there would be challenges in them getting to trust you, or what do you think is how could you guys get over that barrier?
Yeah, potentially. For sure. Whenever sometimes people have this view of consultants that I kind of made fun of prior. And so the thing is we're not really consultants. Like I mentioned, we're practitioners. And so once they understand that and they get to know us, we're not here to create PowerPoints for you. We can if you want. That's not a problem. We've got some whiz bang kids that are great at making things look super. They're now using Canva, not PowerPoint, right? So we can make it look super good, but we really want to identify the areas where we can help and actually fix it. So once we talk through that, it's pretty more often than not a partnership.
Right. That makes sense. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people know consultants, right? I mean, that there's a lot more consultants and your business model is so unique, right? So it's almost sounds like there's a little bit of education and awareness on what this is because to your point, maybe people are automatically assuming you're consultants, but that's far from the truth.
Yeah, exactly. There's, like I said, there's that paradigm, but when we've actually been there, done that, and then want to help people do that themselves, there's a big difference than if we want to just give you opinions and advice on the market, which there's plenty of consultants out there to do that, and we're happy to give you some references to those people if you want somebody that's going to be walking hand in hand and executing.
Perfect. So before I ask my last question on where people can find you, is there anything that you'd like to share that maybe I didn't ask yet?
I think you hit on quite a bit, actually. The market has a lot of options for consultants, for 3PLs, for private equity firms, for manufacturers. So you have to differentiate yourself. And that's what we're doing by doing business with people we want to do business with and enjoy doing business with, and having people work here that we want to work here and we enjoy their company as well. So I would throw that out there to everybody looking for a partner, is make sure it's somebody you want to do business with, you trust doing business with, and then you can have a cup of coffee with as well. So that's made a big difference to me, is working only with those people, whether it's customers or internal, from a satisfaction perspective, which then leads to better results. So if everybody looked for that in a partner and client, I think we'd have a lot more collective success.
No, that's great. And so if people want to get in touch with you, where would they be able to find you online?
Yes, at Leverage SCG for Supply Chain Group. LeverageSCG.com has all of our information and contact. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, Leverage Supply Chain Group, you could follow us there, where we put a lot of material out on what's going on in this space and what we're up to.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, David. I really enjoyed our conversation today. And if you guys want to find David, I'll put a link in the comments below.